Hello and welcome to Python Fundamentals. In this course, we learn the underpinning Python programming skills, preparing for our journey towards mastering the Django Framework and the Python programming language. This tutorial is part of a series of tutorials. You can find the link to the whole playlist in the video description. This tutorial is from our Python Programming Fundamentals for Django Developers course, which you can find and purchase on Udemy. You will find all the latest and updated tutorials, as well as resources and assessments to help accelerate your learning of the subject. The link to the course, which will always provide the best price, can be found in the video description. In my opinion, slicing is a topic which is well worth spending some time on and learning, as it does offer a computationally fast way to methodologically access part of your data. To understand slicing, we first need to remind ourselves of this concept of an index. So this list here behind the scenes has an index, and that allows us to potentially access data in different positions of this list. So this list here has 5 elements. Each item will have or correlate to an index position. So the first item starts at 0, and the last one here is 4. If this isn't a familiar concept, then have a look at the previous tutorial where we introduce list indexing. So this is an important concept to understand when slicing data. So what we're trying to do here when we slice this data is we're trying to return multiple items, specified elements from a list or other data types. So for example here, if I wanted to extract true and the number 2.0, then what I need to do is I need to slice this data structure here. I need to slice this list so that it removes or extracts only the data or elements in position 2 and 3 of my index. Now, something I haven't mentioned yet, in addition to the index, we can also utilize the negative index, which is another way of accessing the data within our list, but using negative numbers. And here you can see, for example, if I wanted to access Ali, then that represents -1. And moving back to the first item in the list here, you can see this is -5. So obviously, depending on the size of your list, will depend on what number the first item in the list will be. But here we're using negative numbers. Now notice with negative numbers, utilizing a negative index here, it doesn't start at 0, it starts at -1. We'll see this in action when we move through some different examples. So let's go through some examples. First of all, we'll just create a new file. I'll just call this example.py as per normal. Ignore all the other files here. I'm just working within the Django application that we're building in this course. Right, so that's my example file. So let's go ahead and now build the shopping list again, maybe, or some sort of list. It doesn't have to be called shopping list. Let's just call this list X for now. And then I'm going to just add some numbers here to make it easier for understand what's going on. I'm going to start at 0. So these numbers don't represent anything other than numbers, which will make it easy for us to see what the slice is performing. There are some really simple rules here, so we'll just go through them step by step. Now, what we need to understand here is the slice will be contained within the square brackets, and we're going to specify, at least at the beginning, start and stop. So we specify where we want to start slicing the data and where we want to stop slicing the data. So for example, if we don't specify a slice, so let's bring in X, and then we're going to utilize the colon there. So this is indicating where we want to slice this data. If we do that, then it's just going to return everything because we haven't specified where we want to start the slice and where we want to end the slice. You may also see this written with 2 colons. In actual fact, there's a third element here, which we'll talk about later in this tutorial. So here is let's call this the first pattern. X here represents a number of the list index. So we specify a number in the list index, maybe 1, that's position 1 of a list. So that's where we're going to start the slice. Now, where we're going to end it, if we leave this blank, then this means that it's just going to run through the rest of the list. So it's just going to print out from X and then upwards to the end of the list. I may not have explained that very well, so let's just see that in action. So here we have our list. Remember, this doesn't represent the list index. This can be absolutely anything. But here we're going to take the list index and we're going to start at, this is 0, 1, 2. So this is in position or index 2, this number here. So we're going to start at there. And then we're now saying we're not going to add anything here on the right-hand side. So in actual fact, we're just going to return all these numbers as well, right to the end of a list. So if we print that out, you can see that we've started in position index 2, 0, 1, 2, and we printed out all the numbers all the way to the end. Once you've done a few of these, it does bed in quite quickly, but it's well worth making some notes if you have forgotten, because it is quite common utilizing this type of approach to return data from a list or other data structures. So next up then, we have from the beginning through to the end. Now, here we don't specify the start, so we're just going to start from the start all the way up until the index position that we specify. Now, the important thing to understand with this, it's the number of the index minus 1. So if, for example, we had 5 items in our list and I specify list index position 3, it will not show list index position 3 value because of minus 1. It will show the one before, so it stops. So this X here represents the index position where we're going to stop. Let's see that in action. This is where some students get a little bit confused or where mistakes can happen. So let's go for 5. So index position 5. So we're going to start at the beginning, left-hand side, start, and then we're going to end at 5. So essentially we're going to grab these numbers here. Now this is where we end. So 5 is where we end. So we don't actually output position index 5. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we don't actually output that. And that's what we mean by minus 1. So what we're going to actually print out is 0 to 4, but we specify 5. So let's give that a go. And you can see what we're printing out. So we'll take another example of that. Let's go for index position 10. Okay, so we want to print out 0 to 9. So therefore we need to specify index position of this number here, which is 10. So let's go for 10, and that's going to print out 0 to 9. Now remember, maybe I've made this a little bit confusing because I'm using the numbers in my list, which is the same as the index, or it might actually make it easier for you. Okay, so next up then is start and stop. So we can specify both start and stop, but all we need to remember with the stop is that we always have to minus 1. So if we want to grab everything up until index 5, then we need to specify index 6 in the right-hand side here, so minus 1. So let's give that a go. So what I want to do now is I want to select these two numbers. Okay, so this is position index 0, 1, 2, 3. So I want to start at 3. So I grab this number here, 3, and then I want to grab this number here. So I need to indicate that I want these two numbers by specifying this index of this number, which happens to be 5. Remember the minus 1. So this should print out 3 and 4. There we go. So we do have a third parameter here which we can specify, and that's the step. So maybe we want to output, for example, every 3 items or every second item element in the list. So here we have stepping to provide that type of feature. So for example, let's just start with colon, colon, so start and end. So here we're not specifying the start and end. So that means we're just going to grab everything. And here we're going to specify the step. So we're going to output every second item in the index. So if I print it out, we have 0, 1, 2, 1, 2, and so on. So this provides a step-in mechanism. So let's now take a look at negative index. So here what we can do is use the negative index to return items. So we haven't introduced this yet, or haven't seen any examples, sorry, of this yet. But let's just remind ourselves again. Whereas here we're using positive numbers to represent items and their position in the list, like I said, we can utilize negative numbers starting from the right-hand side of our list here, moving or incrementing from right to left here to the first element in our list. So by specifying 0, 1, we can, for example, access the last item in our list. So let's give that a go. So minus 1, and that should then provide us access to the last item in our list. And of course, we can use any negative number here. So that should produce 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's in negative index position 5. So we can now utilize these skills to work from the right-hand side. So here we have start and stop. So we want to start from a -4 and we want to stop. So I wonder if you can guess what exactly that is going to produce here. Let's take a look. So -4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're starting here at 7. So that's the start and we're not specifying the end. There we go. So remember what we're doing here. We still have the same principles, start and stop, and it is working from the left to the right. So by starting at -4, that's the starting position. So -1, 2, 3, 4. So we're starting at 7 and the stopping at the end. Okay, so it can start to get a little bit tricky here, but everything except the last 2 items. So here, for example, using negatives on the stop here, we're essentially just telling Python to stop and not read the last 2 elements in this case. So a simple example here. So we're going to start at the beginning. So we're not specifying anything there. And we're going to move all the way up until when we tell Python to stop. So let's go for -4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to stop at 7. There we go. You may see examples of where the developer has utilized the slice function, which works in exactly the same way as we've already explained. So there are 3 parameters that we can pass into this slice function. Those parameters are start, stop, and step, as we've already explained. So we can utilize this approach instead. So let's imagine we wanted to create a new slice and store it in a variable. So we just need to specify here, for example, the start, end, and step. So let's just pass in, for example, the start. We want to start at index position 1. We want to end at position 1, 2, 3. So maybe 3. So all we're actually going to do is output the number 1. Okay, so here what we're going to do is go ahead and we'll take our initial list. We'll then go ahead and utilize Y. That's going to be our slice. So we defined our slice here. And let's print this out.